Phaedra 9, located on a distant planet, is one of the most isolated and least known of the human colonies. Situated on the outer edges of the Galactic Federation, it is generally forgotten and rarely visited. However, Phaedra 9 has gained attention due to its rich underground mineral deposits and energy sources. 4 years, the colony had lived in peace, until that fateful day. One morning, the dark sky of Phaedra 9 was suddenly illuminated by a sharp burst of light. The energy wave spread from the planet's surface across space, detected even by the Federation's most distant sensors. However, the eerie silence following the explosion was even more unsettling. All communications from the colony abruptly ceased, and from that moment on, no news came from Phaedra 9. The Galactic Federation's main headquarters deemed this unusual situation a threat. Initially, it was thought to be a simple system malfunction, but the seriousness of the situation soon became apparent. The explosion on Phaedra 9 was not a normal energy burst, it could have been created by an unknown force. To investigate and, if necessary, defend the colony, the best ship and crew were dispatched. The Aegis, one of the Federation's most advanced warships, was assigned this dangerous mission. The Aegis had participated in some of the Federation's toughest missions over the years and emerged victorious from numerous conflicts. However, this time, the threat they faced was entirely different. Aegis' commander, Marcus Stern, was known for his cool-headedness and resolve. Under his leadership, the crew believed they could overcome any challenge. When Stern received the news of Phaedra 9's disappearance, a silent tension enveloped the ship. Everyone sensed that something might go wrong on this mission, but no one dared to voice it. Stern gathered the crew and explained the situation. He made it clear that this mission was not just a rescue operation, but a matter that could threaten the Federation's security. His eyes conveyed the seriousness of his statement. As the Aegis set out, it entered hyperspace on its way to the region where Phaedra 9 was located. The crew was quietly focused on their duties inside the ship. Though no one spoke of it, everyone shared the same question in their minds: what really happened on Phaedra 9? Stern sat in the captain's chair, lost in thought as he gazed out at the stars. This mission could be the most challenging of his career, and the eyes of the entire Federation were on them. He had to suppress his own doubts because he was responsible for keeping the crew's morale high. He knew everyone trusted him, and he did not want to disappoint them. Stern was aware that silence could be more terrifying than the danger itself. Arriving at Phaedra 9 without knowing exactly what had happened could leave them completely unprepared. Therefore, he began working on a series of defense and attack scenarios, considering all possible outcomes. Additionally, he prepared strategic plans to ensure that all the crew members' diverse skills were used effectively and that the entire team worked together. Although concerns about the mission were not discussed among the crew, it was evident on their faces. The Aegis' power and technological superiority made them secure against most enemies. However, this time, it was not even clear what kind of enemy they were facing. Stern had to rely solely on his intellect and instincts to cope with this uncertainty. As the Aegis approached the orbit of Phaedra 9, the ship's sensors began to pick up increasingly strange data. The energy levels were abnormal, both excessively high and erratic. As they got closer to the planet, it became evident that there were no signs of life, and no structures on the surface remained intact. Stern took a deep breath on the bridge and fixed his eyes on the screen. This mission had evolved from a mere research and rescue operation into a full-scale survival struggle. No matter what happened, he was determined to uncover the truth and solve the mystery of Phaedra 9. Chapter 3, Ambush in the Dark. As the Aegis sped through the dark void of space, a heavy silence filled the ship. Commander Marcus Stern, as always, was stationed at the front of the bridge, closely monitoring the ship's progress towards Phaedra 9 on the large screens. This mission was more than just a routine exploration or rescue operation. It was a task that could involve facing an unknown force that threatened the very existence of humanity. Stern was a seasoned leader, having gained years of experience as a battle strategist and successfully completed many challenging missions. Yet, this assignment was different, even for him. This time, he didn't know the enemy they were facing or what to expect. This uncertainty unsettled him, but it also kept his mind working tirelessly. Stern had always found a way to stay a few steps ahead, and this time would be no different. On one of the main screens on the bridge, the orbit of Phaedra 9 and the planet's abnormal energy levels were displayed. Another screen showed the status of the ship systems and the crew's duty reports. Stern was keeping a close eye on every part of the ship. He had to ensure that everyone was ready for this mission. The crew consisted of the Federation's elite soldiers and scientists. Each was an expert in their field and had participated in successful missions across the galaxy. However, this mission seemed to push the crew to their limits. To prepare them, Stern held a brief meeting on the bridge. During the meeting, Stern made eye contact with each crew member as he spoke. He reminded them of the mission's importance and detailed what to do in the event of any unexpected situations. Among the crew was Jane Carter, the ship's chief engineer and one of Stern's most trusted individuals. Carter was responsible for all the ship systems, and even the smallest malfunction never escaped her attention. Carter turned to Stern and said, "Commander, I've increased the ship's energy shields to maximum levels. If we encounter an unknown energy wave, at least we can absorb the initial impact." Stern gave Carter a nod of approval. "Good work, Carter. We will ensure that all systems operate at full capacity for this mission. No errors will be tolerated." Colonel Victor Hayes, the ship's security chief, was responsible for keeping the crew's morale high. Hayes was a tough but fair leader. He frequently put the crew through drills and never underestimated the importance of combat readiness. At the end of the meeting, Hayes gathered the crew and reminded them once again of the mission's significance. After the meeting, Stern returned to the captain's chair and continued to watch the outside of the ship. Taking a deep breath, he fell into deep thought. As they approached Phaedra 9's orbit, the weight of the uncertainty was growing heavier on his shoulders. Yet, Stern had trained himself and his crew for such situations. He would not leave anything to chance. In the ship's strategy room, Stern gathered his most trusted officers. He instructed them to evaluate possible scenarios and develop strategies accordingly. If the enemy was technologically superior, they would use the agility of the Aegis to avoid attacks and retreat when necessary. If the enemy had numerical superiority, they would employ defensive tactics and engage in combat in confined spaces. Meanwhile, Stern had another plan in mind. Before landing on Phaedra 9's surface, they would use the ship's reconnaissance drones and sensors to scan the planet's surface and atmosphere. If any signs of life or technological activity were detected, they would avoid direct assault. The first attack against an unknown enemy was always the most dangerous moment. Stern glanced once more at the large screen in front of him. As they neared Phaedra 9's orbit, the tension felt by everyone on the ship was rising. However, Stern had confidence in his crew. They were the best of the Federation, and he was certain they would complete the mission successfully. His own determination was reflected in the crew. No one showed their fear, everyone was focused on their duties. On the bridge of the Aegis, a quiet anticipation prevailed. Despite all the data at hand, Stern still wasn't sure what they would find on Phaedra 9. But one thing was certain, whatever happened, they would complete the mission and uncover the mystery of Phaedra 9. When they landed on the surface of Phaedra 9, the tension in the atmosphere surrounding the crew was immediately palpable. The planet's midnight darkness was not just dark but seemed to swallow everything like a void. In the depths of the forest they were advancing through, only distant, strange animal noises and the occasional rustling of leaves could be heard. Commander Stern walked carefully, scanning his surroundings. Each step was meticulously calculated, each breath controlled. His instincts told him something was off, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The darkness was a perfect cover for their enemies to observe them. Suddenly, the darkness seemed to intensify. Carter immediately focused on the shadows of the nearby trees. "Commander, this darkness, it's not normal. It's like, there's some kind of energy here." Stern turned on his flashlight and directed it into the trees. The beam of light tried to pierce the darkness, but quickly faded as if hitting an invisible wall. "This could be an ambush," he whispered. "Everyone stay alert. Move slowly and cautiously." At that moment, he saw a movement within the darkness. There was something among the shadows, just for an instant, but it was clear enough. The enemy's eyes glowed in the depths of the darkness. In an instant, a swift and silent attack came. A long, pointed object, shot from the darkness, pierced one of the crew members' armor. The soldier fell to the ground, unable to scream in pain. As everyone tried to retreat in panic, Stern tried to regain control. "Be careful. Just fall back, don't go deeper." Carter drew her weapon and began firing into the darkness, but the shots seemed to go into the void. "I can't see where they're coming from," she shouted. "It's like they're everywhere." At that moment, a voice came from the darkness. The enemy's voice spoke with a deep, echoing tone. "Humans, you came here to die. The darkness will consume you, and no trace of you will remain." Stern kept his composure and quickly devised a plan. "Form a perimeter," he said. "Point our weapons outward and max out our light sources. Don't let them get lost in the shadows." Following Stern's orders, the crew formed a perimeter. As the darkness thickened, the shadows began to move. The enemy was attacking from different points each time, making it difficult to pinpoint their location. However, Stern had understood the enemy's strategy. They were trying to divide them using the shadows. "Let's mislead them," Stern said as they waited for the next attack. "We'll make it look like we're gathered at one point, but we'll actually move the ambush site. When the enemies come to attack us, we'll catch them in the darkness." Stern's plan began with the crew making a controlled retreat in the dark. They feigned weakness to draw the enemy in. The enemy, as Stern had predicted, approached to attack. When the shadows came close, Stern and his team quickly changed direction and ambushed the enemy from the darkness. This time, the enemy was caught off guard. Stern sprang from the shadows and brought one of the enemies down. "Now," he shouted, signaling his team. "Attack with full force." The enemies emerging from the shadows began to fall one by one. Stern and his crew continued to neutralize the enemies without losing the advantage of the darkness. However, this battle was also draining their strength. As the deadly struggle in the darkness continued, Stern relied on his instincts and strategy. Just as victory seemed near, a large figure suddenly emerged from the darkness. This was the enemy leader, more dangerous than the others with its size and the terrifying energy it radiated. Stern narrowed his eyes, focusing on this figure. "You are the power behind this darkness," he whispered. The figure glided through the darkness like a shadow towards Stern. But this time, Stern was prepared. "This darkness might protect you," Stern said, with a challenge in his voice. "But I don't need light to defeat you." Stern used the energy feeding off the enemy leader's darkness to draw it into his trap. The leader, caught off guard by Stern's move, hesitated for a moment. This was the moment Stern needed. Using his own energy, he delivered the final blow to the enemy leader. As the enemy leader was vanquished, the darkness slowly dissipated. The silence echoing through the depths of the forest indicated that the enemy was completely defeated. As the crew felt the exhaustion of the battle, Stern looked around once more. The darkness of Phaedra 9 was now just a shadow, but many secrets could still be hidden behind it. "This is why we're here," Stern said quietly. "To find and destroy everything hidden in the darkness." The crew gathered around Stern, trying to savor their victory, but everyone shared the same question: had this darkness truly ended? After returning to the ship, Commander Marcus Stern and his exploration team took a deep breath. However, the presence they had left behind and the devastation on Phaedra 9's surface still lingered in their minds. Who were the enemies? What did they want? And more importantly, why had they targeted human colonies? These questions echoed in Stern's mind. In the ship's main hall, the team members gathered together. They were all under the influence of the events they had experienced, but were also filled with the need to see the enemy's true face. Stern took his place at the strategy table and spoke heavily. We need to know who our enemy is now. Seeing their face, understanding them, and eliminating them will be our first step. As the ship swiftly moved away from Phaedra 9, Carter and the science team began analyzing the data collected by the ship. The data indicated a powerful energy source emanating from the depths of Phaedra 9. This energy was unlike anything they had encountered before. Carter, presenting her report to Stern, wore a deep concern on her face. This energy behaves like a mind, not a being. It's like a form of consciousness, but far beyond our understanding. Stern reviewed the report and then made his decision. If this energy is a mind, then there must be a way to communicate with it. We need to understand it and learn what it wants. It was a risky plan, but they had no other option. Instead of returning to Phaedra 9, the ship developed a high-tech tracking device to follow the enemy's trail. This device could trace the energy to its source and attempt to communicate with it. Once preparations were complete, Stern and his team activated the device. The device emitted a massive energy wave, trying to establish contact with the consciousness. After a while, all systems on the ship suddenly went dark. At that moment, a face appeared on the ship's screen. It was a face that resembled a human but was also completely alien. The face was shaped by energy waves and light beams. Its eyes were deep and empty but frighteningly wise. Its lips moved with thoughts rather than words. We are the children of the Empire, the face said, as if directly addressing the team's minds. You, humanity, have become an obstacle in our path. Either step aside or be annihilated. Stern, momentarily weighed down by the gravity of these words, realized how powerful the enemy was by the determination and ruthlessness in those words. But retreat was not an option. I don't know who you are, Stern said with resolve. But humanity never surrenders. If you want a war, we will fight until the end. The face hesitated for a moment. This was perhaps a small victory for Stern and his team. Then you will be lost within the war, said the face, and then energy waves spread once more and the face disappeared. Encountering the enemy's face further solidified the crew's determination. They now knew who they were fighting. This awareness gave them a target and a purpose. Stern turned to his crew and said, "This is just the beginning. We still don't fully understand the enemy's true power, but we will find them and destroy them." The war had begun, but this war would be won not just with weapons but with minds and determination. Stern etched the enemy's face into his memory, knowing it would be humanity's greatest threat. The ship had quickly recovered after the first encounter with the enemy. Commander Marcus Stern couldn't erase the enemy's face from his mind. This being was more than an ordinary foe, it felt like a fragment of the universe's dark essence. Stern acknowledged the enemy's technological superiority, but he knew humanity's greatest strength lay in its resolve and resistance. Data arriving on the ship indicated that the enemy's main base was deep within Phaedra 9. It was not just a base but the central hub of the enemy's power. Stern knew that a confrontation at this center would determine the fate of the entire war. In the tactical room, Stern and his team reviewed the battle plans one last time. Carter was discussing a map showing areas of high energy concentration. This hub draws all the enemy's energy. If we can strike at this point, we can weaken them. But the cost will be heavy. Stern glanced at the map. If we're going to win this war, we need to give everything we have. We'll direct our most powerful attack at this center, but we must deceive the enemy. We need to draw their attention elsewhere. The team prepared to make one final assault on Phaedra 9. The ship's weapon systems were brought to full capacity. The entire crew knew the danger of this attack, but none of them considered stepping back. As the ship entered the planet's atmosphere, the enemy's defense systems reacted immediately. The sky lit up with the enemy's energy beams. However, Stern knew that these attacks were not the real target. The ship's course was set towards the planet's darkest and most dangerous region, where the energy was most concentrated. Meanwhile, a group under Carter's command launched an attack on another area to distract the enemy. This move diverted the enemy's attention and bought the time needed to reach the real target. As the ship approached the area where the central hub was located, the enemy's defense systems intensified. Energy waves struck the ship, pushing its shields to their limits. However, Stern did not halt the attack. Closer. We need to reach the energy core. The ship's powerful weapons began to breach the enemy's defenses. A series of explosions pierced the enemy's energy fields. Stern felt that this moment was right. Now. Attack with all our might. The ship's forward weapons fired directly at the energy core. A powerful explosion released energy, shaking everything around. The enemy's face once again appeared in Stern's mind. "This will be your end," whispered the enemy's voice, as if echoing throughout the ship. But this time, Stern was not afraid. "No," he said with determination. "This will be your end." A final explosion shook the planet's surface. The energy core overloaded and caused a chain reaction that destroyed all enemy forces. The ship had already moved away from the explosion, but they could still feel the devastation and the last screams of the enemy lost in the planet's depths. After the explosion, silence reigned on the ship. Everyone was trying to process what had happened. Stern stood on the bridge, looking at the dust clouds rising from Phaedra 9's surface. "We did it," he said to himself, but he knew very well the cost of this victory. Carter came up and touched his shoulder. "Is the war over?" Stern took a deep breath. "This war is over, but more will come. We won, but we saw how dangerous our enemies are. We must always stay alert." As the ship slowly moved away from Phaedra 9's orbit, the crew enjoyed the taste of victory. But Stern knew that this was only the first victory in the long war humanity would fight in the galaxy's dark corners. The enemy's face might return, but humanity would always resist. As the ship drifted away from Phaedra 9's orbit, the crew savored their victory. It was a silent moment of triumph, but this silence felt more like the calm before a storm. Commander Stern began to sense something was wrong. He had trusted his instincts throughout the battle, and now this unease warned him that something was not over. At that moment, the ship's sensors detected an abnormal energy signal. Stern turned to Carter without taking his eyes off the screen. "What does this mean?" Carter, looking at the screens with a pale face, replied, "Commander, this is a signal from the enemy's energy source. It means the energy source we thought was destroyed is still active." Stern frowned and focused on the screen. "How is this possible? The energy core exploded, everything should have been destroyed." However, the screen showed another reality. In the depths of the massive crater formed on Phaedra 9's surface, a wave of energy was rapidly rising. This wave was not a normal explosion, it was the final move of a conscious entity. At that moment, a strange unease began to spread around the ship. The crew gathered on the bridge, staring at the screen. The energy wave rising from the crater seemed to move as if it were alive. Stern felt like he had been expecting this moment. "Everyone prepare for battle." But this time, the enemy was not a physical entity. When the energy wave hit the ship's shields, it started to create abnormal effects in the ship systems. Electronic systems malfunctioned, lights flickered, and the ship began to shake. Stern realized they had lost control of the ship. Carter shouted in panic, "Commander, this energy is infiltrating our systems." The enemy didn't die, it just transformed into another form. As the ship fell under the influence of the energy wave, a presence began to emerge in Stern's mind. It was the face of the enemy he had seen before, but now it was much more powerful. This entity was trying to take over Stern's mind. "You cannot defeat me, human," it whispered in the depths of his consciousness. Stern fought with all his strength. "You were a shadow, and you will vanish as a shadow once again." But the entity had infiltrated every part of the ship. Crew members were starting to be affected one by one, losing control. Stern knew he had to fight this battle alone. It was not just a mental struggle, it was also a fight to regain control of the entire ship. As Stern battled the entity in his mind, he simultaneously worked to engage the ship's manual controls. Every move was calculated to counteract the effects of the energy wave. Eventually, Stern managed to push the entity out of his mind. However, he realized that, in its final act, the entity had activated the ship's self-destruct mechanism. To all crew members, Stern said, his voice steady despite the situation. Abandon the ship. Get to the escape pods immediately. The crew obeyed Stern's command without question. As everyone boarded the pods, Stern remained alone in the ship's control room. The ship was rapidly programmed to self-destruct, but this was the only way to prevent the enemy from returning. Stern took one last look at the ship's control panel and took a deep breath. I will end this war. I will bring everything to an end. As the ship exited the atmosphere, Stern accelerated the self-destruction process. With all systems shutting down, he decided to send one final message. I fought for humanity. This is my final sacrifice for our future. We won. The ship was destroyed in a massive explosion in the depths of space. Stern's bravery ensured the crew's survival and prevented the enemy from returning once more. However, the cost of this victory was heavy. When the crew gathered in the escape pods, they listened in silence to Stern's final message. Their commander's sacrifice had secured their victory and freedom. Now there was a legend echoing through the dark corners of the galaxy: Commander Stern, a hero who preserved humanity's hope even in the darkness. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you in the next story.